Extract from Deus Ex Mechanicus, Codex Necrons, 3rd edition, pages 6 and 7, written by Andy Chambers, narrated by R.J. Bailey. The scream of the engines fought against the howling winds in a terrifying crescendo of doom. Hypervelocity microparticles skittered across the hull of the ship like skeletal fingers as it wallowed in the storm, shuddering and dropping by steps as the pilot struggled for control. In the midst of the tumult, Lachius Danziger, Tech Priest Engineer, Votaris Lauder, Illuminant of Mars, Adept of the Cult Mechanicus, was struggling to open up the skull of the failing pilot, and cursing in a distinctly unpriestly fashion as he struggled to find the right tools for the job. "Damn it! Osil, find me a hydro-coupling, my boy. We'll need one if I can free these accursed fasteners. Look in the vestibule." He tried to keep his voice calm, so as not to frighten his acolyte, but Osil's face was pallid in his cowl as he nodded and hurried out through the rusty bulkhead hatch. The lander's rattling, brass-bound altimeter showed them at a height of nearly 7 kilometers above the planet. They had already been dropping out of control for 12. As Lachius turned back to the rune-etched panel enclosing the ship's pilot, another violent lurch smashed his shaven skull against it, triggering an engram patch he had only recently divined from his auto-shrine. It was about their too rapidly approaching destination, and ran in confusing counterpoint through his right optic viewer as he tried to focus on repairing the nav spirit. "Neogeddon is a dead world." The ringing impact of Lachius's metal-shot head had partially freed the rusting key bolts. With a whispered prayer for forgiveness from the already distraught machine spirit, he bent to the task. He carefully unscrewed the panel, murmuring the rite of unbinding, and ensuring that he removed the keys in the correct cardinal directions. The ghostly image of a dun-colored sphere hovered in his right eye. Red text scrolled past it. "Orbital distance 0.78 AU. Equatorial diameter 9.749 km. Rotation 34.6 hours. Axial tilt 0.00. As he'd feared, the coupling between the auger spike and the pilot stone had ruptured, binding the pilot to its landing beacon. He checked the altimeter as he began the ritual of dislocation to remove the charred remnants. Less than 2 kilometers of howling winds now lay beneath their rocking hull. Weather, sea storms. "Osil, where's that coupling, boy?"
"Here, father. The first one was faulty and I had to go back for another."
0% precipitation, wind speed, constant 24 kts, variance 76 kts. Lachius took the twist of hydroplastic without comment, but silently gave praise to the Omnissiah that the lad had been attentive enough to spot the difference. Under current circumstances, a normally forgivable sin of oversight could prove fatal. Lachius took a breath to steady himself before beginning the ritual of insertion. Life forms, autochthonic, none. Introduced, none. Less than a league of free air remained before they would hurtle into solid rock. His servo hand shook as he tried to apply the prescribed number of half-turns to the coupling mounts. He yearned to simply call the rite finished and resurrect the pilot, but years of discipline and doctrine drove him on as he completed the benediction against failure, applied the sacred unguents, and retrieved the panel so he could begin the final rites of protection and sealing. Archaeotech resource, limited. Xeno artifacts, at 9,000 million years pre-GA. Class, Omega.
"Father, I can see dust dunes below us. I think we're going to crash."
Notes. First catalogued 7/243.751M32. Rogue trader Ziatal Parneview, orbital augury only. Annexus Imperialis.
Mechanism, I restore thy spirit. Let the god-machine breathe half-life unto thy veins and render thee functional.
Lacheus firmly depressed the activation rune on the pilot's casing and prayed. Landed 6-832.021M35. Explorator Magos Dural Levank. Expedition lost. Landed 7-362.238M37. Explorator Magos Prime Holison Z. Expedition lost. The lander's engines rose in a triumphant scream to drown out the rushing winds and skittering dust. Lacheus and Osil felt the heavy weight of high-G deceleration as the ungainly craft steadied itself and slowed. Lacheus could see dust dunes too now, through the curving port in the lander's prow, but the dunes, with their trailing streamers of blowing dust, were dwarfed by the serried ranks of sharp-angled, black monoliths which rose up around the lander as it dipped between them. Osil let out an involuntary gasp as the scale of the structures became apparent. The monoliths were mountain-sized edifices of harsh, alien rock, cutting the horizon into a saw-toothed edge or a predator's maw. Landed 6-839.641M41. Explorator Magos Prime Reston Egal. Surface survey. Xenostructures catalogued. The lander changed course, angling towards a vast, dark triangle which blotted out half the sky. The pilot spirit was faithfully following the beacon now, bringing them in towards a tiny ring of light in the shadows below it. There lay the explorators' camp. You have been listening to Extract from Deus Ex Mechanicus, Codex Necrons, 3rd edition, pages 6 and 7, written by Andy Chambers, narrated by R.J. Bailey. Thank you to Andy Chambers for writing the fiction I grew up with. Thank you to Graham McNeill for helping attribute the right authors to their individual stories. This production, like all of Oldex, is entirely unofficial and uncommercial, from an out-of-print publication, is a derivative work with all copyrights owned by Games Workshop, and is a celebration of the hobby and lore I grew up with. If you have suggestions for other old Codex fiction for me to narrate on this channel, you can comment or contact me on Twitter at RJ Bailey. Links are in the show description. You can follow Graham McNeill on Twitter at Graham McNeill, and you can find his website at graham-mcneil.com.